Shall we be seated? Your Excellency, Mr. President, Your Excellency, the Vice President, President of the Senate, Speaker, House of Representatives, Chairman of the Nigeria Governors Forum and Governor of Ekiti State, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Head of the Civil Service of the Federation, Chief of Staff to the President, Honorable Ministers, Senior Government Officials, resource persons, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. We give glory to God for preserving us to be part of this midterm ministerial performance review retreat for ministers, permanent secretaries, and top government officials. I think this is the third in the series in the life of this administration. I'll do a quick rundown of the things we'll do in the morning segment, the first segment of the program, and who does what. Shortly, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, and who is also like the chief host and convener, will come to give us objectives and context setting for this ministerial performance review retreat. After that, we're going to take goodwill messages from Amina J. Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General, United Nations, and Her Excellency Katrina Lang, British High Commissioner to Nigeria. Then we will listen to the father of the nation, President Muhammadu Buhari. His speech will be concluded with the unveiling of the Presidential Priorities Performance Management System. That will be unveiled at the right hand of this hall, and to join him in that ceremony will be the Vice President and Secretary to the Government of the Federation. After that, it will be the turn of His Excellency the Vice President to give us a progress report on the Economic Sustainability Plan. Economic Sustainability Plan. You have perhaps heard of how we got out of the COVID-induced recession so fast. The key is the Economic Sustainability Plan, and the Vice President will brief us on that plan. After that, we will listen to one of our own and an international figure, one of our greatest exports to the world, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, President, Africa Development Bank. He will speak to us on Nigeria's economic resurgence, learning from the African experience. Nigeria's economic resurgence, learning from the African experience. That will come from Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, President, Africa Development Bank. That will conclude the opening session, after which the media will take their retreat, and we will go into a technical session, which will also be a closed session. So that's a quick rundown of the things that are ahead in the immediate minutes ahead of us. My pleasure at this point to invite the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, to give us objectives and context setting. SGM.
Your Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, Your Excellency, the Vice President, the President of the Senate, and the Right Honorable Speaker of the House of Representatives, Your Excellencies, members of the diplomatic corps here gathered, distinguished members of the Federal Executive Council, our resource persons, senior government officials here present, distinguished members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to be part of yet another Ministerial Performance Review retreat holding today at the State House Conference Center, Abuja. And it gives me a great pleasure to welcome particularly His Excellency the President, the Vice President, the President of the Senate, and the Right Honorable Speaker of the House of Representatives, and also one of our own, the President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, the British High Commissioner, particularly because FCDO, PAL, our major technical partners, and all the honorable members here, and members of the cabinet, permanent secretaries, and other special guests to this very important event. You will recall that the first ministerial retreat was held in August of 2019. That was the first in the second tenure of President Muhammadu Buhari. And that was for ministers designate, permanent secretaries, and top government functionaries. The retreat provided update on the status of policies, programs, and projects of government with the intent to prepare incoming cabinet ministers to assume their roles. It was also designed to map a trajectory towards the delivery of the administration's priority agenda for 2019 to 2023. 1 year after the first ministerial review retreat was held on the 7th and 8th September 2020. It provided an opportunity for us as government functionaries to collectively assess our first-year performance against the ministerial mandates and track the progress of our commitment to deliver the development aspirations captured in the 9 priority areas adopted at the 2019 presidential retreat. Over the past 25 months, ministers have continued to implement the deliverables assigned to them in line with their ministerial mandates, jointly signed with the permanent secretaries, which serve as a performance bond with the president. In terms of the performance of the Federal Executive Council, let me acknowledge that the last 2 years have been most productive. During this second term of Mr. President, from May 29, 2019 to August 31st, 2021, the Federal Executive Council had held 52 meetings and granted 579 approvals, comprising of 381 contracts, 110 policies, and 88 briefs and notes. Overall, the number of contracts, policies, and briefs and notes approved by the Federal Executive Council between November 2015 and August 2021 stand at 1,403, comprising of 878 contracts, 319 policies, and 206 briefs and notes. From the above, the 878 contracts approved by the Federal Executive Council mostly targeted the provision of infrastructure geared towards enabling faster economic growth and development. In the same vein, the analysis also shows that the government remained focused on its cardinal responsibility of responsibly addressing the myriad of needs and challenges of its citizens through the 319 approved policies initiated during the period. The details of this data are contained in the newly developed compendium of fake approvals from November 2015 to August 2021, which is part of the retreat documents circulated to participants. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to say that with the introduction of the ministerial mandates by the President, there is greater clarity of expectations of MDAs on deliverables of government priorities to achieve demonstrable results. Today, there are embedded systems of performance management and improved accountability and transparency for the delivery of services to citizens. Key focus of this midterm ministerial retreat is to review the status of progress towards the delivery of 9 priority areas. This is intended to harness our collective contributions towards generating practicable solutions that will guarantee the level of impact we can be proud of by the end of our tenure. The retreat also aims to deepen collaboration and enhance cohesion among cabinet members for efficient and effective service delivery. In order to achieve this objective, therefore, the retreat has been structured to cover 3 main focus areas. The first looks at an overview of ministerial performance within the first 2 years of the administration, particularly within the context of the second tenure of President Muhammad Buhari. This will present key achievements and identify opportunities for improvement. The second will reflect on lessons and good practices from other clients, featuring external speakers, including Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, President, African Development Bank, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Director General, World Trade Organization, Ambassador Yonof Fred Aga, Director General and Chief Trade Negotiator for Nigeria, and Dr. Chris Pycroft, Director Development, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. The third will then focus on new initiatives and strategies to accelerate delivery. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, following Mr. President's directive at the first year ministerial retreat, the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation over the past year has worked assiduously towards operationalizing a Central Delivery Coordination Unit, CDCU. The Office of the Secretary to the Government has set up a functional and well-equipped physical office for the delivery unit, staffed with delivery managers deployed by the Office of the Head of Civil Service of the Federation from the product of the Learning Enhancement and Development Program, LEAD-P, while 2 desk officers have been appointed in all 28 ministries and the Office of the Head of Service of the Federation. At the 2020 ministerial retreat, beyond establishing a functional coordination mechanism, other issues identified as performance impeding factors include inadequate interministerial collaboration, disconnect with macroeconomic priorities, lack of intermediate targets, and limited civil service delivery capacity. In establishing the CDCU, we accommodated the feedback received in framing a performance management system by developing a unified collaborative results framework to monitor all 9 priority areas. Furthermore, the framework incorporates all ministerial deliverables that have a direct impact on specific priorities arranged by drivers' key result areas. With this development, rather than work in silos, focusing on the implementation of individual deliverables, the results framework provides an outline through which ministries can collaborate to achieve the objectives of each priority area. Additionally, to improve transparency and accountability, sectoral strategies, plans initially framed as ministerial deliverables have been unbundled to reveal actual activities being implemented. This has been supported with a performance management system, PMS, that serves as a tool for measurement of MDA's performance in the implementation of the ministerial deliverables and the delivery of priority areas against targets. The PMS, which Mr. President will formally unveil today, will be set up in the President's office, along with that of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, as well as in the office of the Permanent Secretary, Cabinet Affairs Office, and the Delivery Unit. I encourage ministries to set up their mini delivery units with dashboards, especially in the ministers' and permanent secretaries' offices, to enable electronic data collection and real-time information on the status of delivery against their respective mandates. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to address the issue of lack of intermediate targets, annual targets have been split into quarterly intermediate targets at the output and outcome levels to create an early warning system. Delivery capacity is also being built through the CDCU for the delivery managers and desk officers from the MDAs. A capacity building program commenced in February of 2021, using a formal curriculum to induct them on the objectives of the delivery unit and acquaint them with the expected roles and functions. Bilateral meetings and high-level engagements were organized in May and June 2021 to sensitize leaders of all federal ministries on the new results framework and the performance management system. The report of such meetings showed that MDAs have a better understanding and appreciation of how their ministerial mandates contribute directly to the priority areas and the possible impact of their activities on the lives of Nigerians. Let me use this opportunity to thank all ministers and permanent secretaries once again for the support given to the team from the Office of the Secretary to the government during the bilateral sessions. To further strengthen the capacity of the civil service, a technical retreat was facilitated by the Office of the Secretary to the government in June for over 100 persons, consisting of the delivery managers, 2 desk officers drawn from the 28 ministries, and the office of the head of civil service, and other officials of the Office to the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. One of the lessons from the retreat was the need for MDAs to make adequate budgetary provision for the implementation of associated projects to guarantee the implementation of policy priorities. The Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning has been engaged to ensure the budget allocations are linked to the ministerial deliverables. In our collaborative efforts to deepen the delivery mechanisms at the ministry level, 4 ministries have been supported to inaugurate and train their delivery team task, which is made up of all agencies and departments under such ministries, to ensure timely training support to ensure that they meet up with their ministerial deliverables. Plans are in progress to provide training support to additional 5 ministries to establish their delivery task teams. I am confident that this development will trigger a more pragmatic approach to the performance management across the entire federal public service, and which will be cascaded to the states across the Federation to adopt the community of practice as done in other climes. At this juncture, let me also state that reports of the activities of the delivery unit have been incorporated into the weekly presidential briefings by the Office of the Secretary to the Government. Going forward, the office will also be submitting quarterly progress reports on the implementation of the ministerial mandates to the President. This is to keep the President abreast on the level of achievement of all deliverables against set targets. I am grateful to note that these achievements were made possible with the ardent support of our technical partners, FCDO, PAL, who have provided technical assistance to the office since 2019 to embed performance systems and operationalize the delivery unit up to the preparation of this retreat. Your Excellencies, before I end my remarks, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the technical session for this retreat have been designed to focus on the following thematic areas. 1, progress report on the implementation of the economic sustainability plan. 2, experience sharing on Nigeria's economic resurgence, learning from other African experience, and the rest that have been enumerated by Mr. Femi Adesina. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this retreat is important as it will be a solution-driven retreat and participatory in nature. I therefore urge participants to make useful and constructive contributions to the deliberations. The outcome of the retreat is expected to pave the way to accelerate the delivery of government policies, programs, and projects over the remaining 19 months. Therefore, much is expected of us as cabinet members, permanent secretaries, and heads of strategic government agencies if we must deliver on Mr. President's legacy projects. I admonish us to participate actively in all sessions of the retreat, asking questions, enriching our conversations with the perspectives that you have, and also thinking critically about adapting key points and lessons from the deliberations to shape the way we work over the next 19 months. In closing, I invite you to watch a short video that further explains the Central Delivery Coordination Unit and its functions as enablers on the performance of individual ministries in line with the 9 priority areas of the government. Once again, Your Excellency, Mr. President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to this very important retreat, and I implore us, in my capacity as the chairman of COVID-19 Presidential Steering Committee, to strictly adhere to the COVID-19 precautionary non-pharmaceutical measures put in place for all activities during this retreat. I look forward to having a very stimulating discussion over the next 2 days. I thank you once again for your kind attention, and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you.
In 2019, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, instituted a performance delivery framework under the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation to track the implementation of the 9 priority areas and ministerial mandates through a performance bond signed with incoming honorable ministers and permanent secretaries of ministries, departments, and agencies. In fulfillment of the aspiration of Mr. President to leave a lasting legacy in his final term in office, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, set up the Central Delivery Coordinating Unit, CDC, as a vehicle to support ministries in identifying key bottlenecks and enablers that can power delivery towards achieving completion of legacy projects, programs, and policies of their administration. First started when I was appointed to the government on the 30th of October 2017. When I got to office within a period of a month, I realized that there wasn't a single resource document that you could go to
to be able to see the laudable policies, programs, and projects that had been executed by the Buhari administration in the first 2 years of his tenure. We started on the 10th of January and ended on the 2nd of May, where ministers came in. And it was a combination of our fake meeting and those presentations that finally gave us a product that we call the compendium of the status of the implementation of policies, programs, and projects between 2015 to 2017. That was the document that at the end of the tenure, first tenure of the president, that was now transferred, because at the end of the tenure, the president set up 2 committees. One of the committees was the one chaired by His Excellency, the Vice President, the committee on the evaluation of the policies, programs, and projects within the period of 2015 to 2019. But the compendium that we have produced only covered 2 years. So ministers were asked to fill in the gaps. So it was the work of this committee, the one headed by the Vice President, that evolved 11 priority areas, which was further subjected to the presidential policy dialogue, which was chaired by Mr. President himself. At the end of that dialogue, it was reduced to 9. It was the responsibility of the Office of the Secretary to the Government, working along with the Office of the Vice President, to now align the deliverables of these particular ministries in terms of mandates. After the appointment of the ministers, we held the first retreat in 2019. After that retreat, it became very obvious, identifying the deliverables of each ministry. And we got them to sign the ministerial mandates, which is like a performance bond between the ministers and the president. And that is the yardstick which we have continuously evaluated the work of the ministries. In addition to that, one of the key takeaways that came out of the retreat in 2019 was the need for proper coordination of government activities in terms of looking at what the ministries were doing, what was the implementation strategies, how far have they gone in terms of implementation, and in verifiable and quantifiable terms, what was the rate of successes in terms of achievements. And that gave birth to the central delivery coordinating unit, which Mr. President sanctioned in his statement at the close of the 2019 retreat. And to the glory of God, we've given birth to the central delivery coordinating unit today. And in its place, certain platforms have been created. The performance management system has been put in place. We have a dashboard that on real time can tell you exactly where we stand in respect of every project by way of reporting to Mr. President on a weekly basis. We keep track of what is happening, and Mr. President is seized of certain information that would ordinarily not be available except we had such a system in place. When you have a leader like President Muhammad Buhari, and who is very generous in giving you the opportunity to do what you think is best for the administration, you can walk with your shoulders high, and that is what we have experienced in the management of the Central Delivery and Coordinating Unit. He is asked questions, he is asked for reporting on a weekly basis, and that expresses his commitment to the process, which is very, very important in establishing the delivery unit. And some of the factors and some of the successes that I would say we have recorded in the course of the last 1 year is our ability to look at the dashboard and see exactly where we stand in respect of all the key parameters that we want to achieve. And that has given credibility to what we're doing. We've been open to it, and we've allowed external assessors to even do the assessment for us. The last retreat, the one of last year, was heavily influenced by the assessment of external assessors. And at the end of the exercise, I believe that we were scored relatively high in terms of what we've been able to achieve. And we've looked at what it has provided for us. The Central Delivery Unit has helped us in terms of identifying the challenges and what are the enablers that will help us overcome those challenges. And I believe going forward, as we deepen these processes of accountability, which Mr. President wants to leave as part of his legacy, I believe that we will leave a tradition that will help in driving governance in this country, in terms of its openness, in terms of its accountability to the people. Because the delivery unit is not a process that will go anytime soon. It will remain and it will become part of the governance process in this country. And this is absolutely one of the biggest achievements of my office. And I feel satisfied that as part of the value added to this office, we're going to leave a tradition of accountability to the people of Nigeria.
Thank you. That was the Secretary to the Government of the Federation speaking to us both physically and virtually. The next item will be Goodwill messages. The first will come from Amina J. Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. She will speak to us virtually.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, thank you for inviting me to address you today. In various countries, we are seeing stark reminders of the risk to development of poverty and economic collapse, conflict, political instability, and natural disasters. Across the world, the COVID-19 pandemic has devastated lives and livelihoods and disrupted economies and societies. Today, a lopsided recovery is deepening inequalities. Nigeria has so far weathered COVID-19 better than many feared, but we must keep our guard up and use the recovery as an opportunity to pivot to a greener, more resilient and sustainable world for everyone and for future generations. The 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals do show the way, but we must pick up the pace. We need a paradigm shift in our approach to development. We need to rebuild trust and social cohesion through a renewed social contract that also gives weight to the interests of future generations. This is what the Secretary General called for in his report, Our Common Agenda. In Nigeria, this requires a robust vaccination drive to put an end to the pandemic. This will require a comprehensive plan for a just transition to sustainable energy and an inclusive sustainable development model. And building upon the commitments made at the Food Systems Summit last month, the implementation of the national pathways to food systems transformation that Nigeria has announced. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, the Ministerial Performance Review of policies, programs, and projects of the Nigerian government come at a crucial time. It is an opportunity to take stock of what's worked and where course correction is needed to deliver on the promise of the 2030 Agenda. Nigerians have enormous potential and incredible assets to enable us meet this challenge. First and foremost, the dynamism of our young people. Investing in education, training, health, digital technology, and access to energy, especially targeting Nigeria's youth, will be key. I urge you to work closely with international partners to mobilize finance for these critical investments to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. The new allocation of the special drawing rights to Nigeria provides a unique opportunity in that regard. Ladies and gentlemen, across all this, you can continue to count on the strong partnership and the deep cooperation between Nigeria and the United Nations as Nigeria charts its path towards the achievement of the SDGs in this decade of action. I wish all of you a very successful retreat, wishing, of course, I was with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina J. Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. The next Goodwill message will come from Her Excellency Katrina Lang, British High Commissioner to Nigeria. You're welcome to the microphone, Madam.
Your Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Your Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, ladies and gentlemen, friends, please permit me to stand in the existing protocol. And thank you for allowing me to say a few words at the start of this very important two-day retreat. And I feel so honored to be here at this incredible esteemed gathering. Everybody, the who's who of Nigeria, are here. And I'm very proud of the humble contribution that the UK has played in helping you to develop your delivery framework. So I wanted to share very briefly 3 personal lessons from my 5 years working with Tony Blair, one of the gurus of delivery, working on both his strategy unit and his delivery unit. But before that, to set the context, I wanted to say why I think ministerial performance matters so much. Well, it matters because, of course, the Nigerian people are the bedrocks of your democracy. And democracy is not just about elections, important as these are. It's really about accountability to the people, enabling people when they cast their vote to make an informed choice, and also enabling your vibrant society to hold you to account. And that only works, as Boss Mustafa was telling us, if you have a rigorous delivery framework, so you know if you're on track and the people of Nigeria know that you're on track and can hold you to account. So I really want to emphasize how important these discussions are today. We've been on this journey in the UK, so I'm so delighted Nigeria's embarking on this as well. Because ultimately this will be your collective legacy. As Boss Mustafa said, setting up such a framework will be something you can hand over to future governments of Nigeria. So my 3 brief lessons from working with Tony Blair, excuse me, over 5 years. Firstly, how important political buy-in. I've seen delivery units in many countries. They only work if there's buy-in right at the top from His Excellency, the President himself. So I was delighted to see Boss Mustafa showing us that weekly dashboard, which is presented to the President every week. That's exactly what Tony Blair had. And it held us as the civil servants, our feet to the fire, and it holds your ministers to feet to the fire. So that's the first lesson. The second lesson is strategy and delivery both need to work together. One of your great authors, Chinua Achebe, said, if you find water rising up to your ankle, that's the time to do something about it, not when it's around your neck. So what that means is having that long-term strategic vision really matters. But strategy without delivery won't get you very far. It's having those clear goals and accountability for delivering them based on really good data and really good evidence, and as Amina Mohammed said, ability to do cross-correction that will enable delivery. And my third lesson, and perhaps my most important one, really think through what are the real barriers to delivery. Where are those real blockages? And particularly difficult, but I'm afraid we have to confront it, when those barriers are the interests of politicians, bureaucrats, the culture of the civil service. It happens everywhere. We bumped into this at Tony Blair's delivery unit. You have to tackle it head on, get to the heart of the barriers. So I would encourage you to be bold on this. So 3 lessons in summary: political buy-in. Secondly, strategy and delivery are both important. They need to go together. And thirdly, tackle the real barriers. You've got 17 months till the next election, and there's still time to get a lot done. But I would encourage you to focus on the really key priorities, the ones that really matter to the legacy of this administration. Let me conclude by saying how much the UK believes in Nigeria and her potential, as Amina Mohammed said. We are committed to this excellent relationship. We're excited to welcome you to COP26 in Glasgow in November, and we wish you all the very best for these sessions over the next 2 days. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Your Excellency, the British High Commissioner to Nigeria, Katrina Lang. We have come to the high point of this morning's session event, which is that time when we are going to listen to the father of the nation. Some call him a man of accountability, and that is what he is. Others call him the Mai Gaskiya, meaning the honest one, which is what he is. We know that he is a man you can follow, who will not lead you astray. My pleasure at this point to invite His Excellency, President Muhammadu Buhari, to give the opening speech. Towards the end of the speech, he will go to cut a tape in which he will be accompanied by His Excellency, the Vice President, and the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. Your Excellency, Mr. President.
Please sit down. Thank you. Your Excellency, the Vice President, the President of the Senate, Speaker of the House of Representatives, Secretary of the Federation, Head of Service, Chief of Staff, Honorable Ministers, President of the African Development Bank, senior government officials, resource persons, members of the diplomatic corps, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the mid-term Ministerial Performance Review Retreat organized to assess progress made towards the achievement of the 9 key priorities of this administration. This third retreat comes at a significant time in our economic foreline, a time, excuse me, when Nigeria strives to remain resilient as it recovers from an economic recession and from the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. In addition to economic activities slowing down in 2020 due to the resultant lockdown measures necessary to curtail the spread of the virus, the pandemic necessitated adjustments of our policy goals and methods of working to achieve our objectives. Last year, often reviewing the overall performance across all priority areas, it was evident that to achieve our ambitious plans and bring several ministerial deliverables back on track for completion by 2023, we would have to make concerted efforts to refocus our activities to deliver on projects which were delayed as a result of the pandemic. Progress made in the year 2020 also illustrated the need for setting up intermediate targets to address the disconnect between MDA, deliverables, and key macroeconomic priorities. In addition, it is evident that interministerial collaboration is vital to driving increased impact and effective delivery. In view of the importance of this year's retreat, I will sit through all the sessions to listen to the cumulative assessment of our performance over the last 2 years and join the discussion on best approach strategies to implementing planned policies, programs, and projects that can significantly diversify our economy away from its dependence on oil revenue while sustaining the current economic growth trajectory. As I stated recently, 2 years and some months into the second term, the tradition of subjecting our projects and programs to independent and critical self-review has taken firm root through sector reporting during cabinet meetings and at retreats. These steps have helped to identify and strengthen weak areas, close gaps, as well as build cohesion and synergy in governance to manage the economy and improve the delivery of public goods and services to Nigerians. I am glad to note that over the past 2 years, ministers have rendered reports to the Federal Executive Council on their activities related to the achievement of their ministerial mandates. Some of the notable achievements include the establishment of Infraco PLC in 2020 as a world-class infrastructure development vehicle wholly focused on Nigeria, with combined debt and equity take-up capital of 15 trillion naira, to be managed by an independent infrastructure fund manager. The Prudential Infrastructure Development Fund was also established in 2020 with more than $1 billion in funding. In addition, we have launched the Nigeria Innovation Fund by the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority. This is aimed at addressing investment opportunities in the domestic technology sector, data networking, data centers, software, agriculture, agri-tech, biotech, and more. On transportation, we are growing the stock and quality of our roads, rail, air, and water transport infrastructure. The Prudential Infrastructure Development Fund projects are also advancing remarkably. These include the 11.9 kilometer Second Niger Bridge, 120 kilometer Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, 375 kilometers Abuja, Kaduna, Zaria, Kano Expressway, and the East-West Road. Most of these projects are expected to be completed within the second term of our administration. Furthermore, we have made tremendous progress on railway projects in the country. Upgrading of our railway network is being extended with the recent completion of the Lagos-Ibadan line. The Itape-Ajakuta rail line has finally been completed and commissioned after 30 years of its conception. Work is expected to commence very soon on the Port Harcourt, Maiduguri line and Calabar-Lagos coastal line to connect the southern and eastern states of our country. Progress is also being made on the upgrading of our airports with the state-of-the-art facilities in line with world-class safety standards. On the economy, we witnessed 3 consecutive quarters of growth after negative growth rates recorded in the second and third quarters of 2020. The GDP grew from 0.8% in 2017 to 2.2% in 2019, but declined in the first quarter of 2020 as a result of the downward trend in global economic activities triggered by the coronavirus pandemic. As at second quarter of 2021, GDP growth rate was at 5.01%, the highest since the inception of this administration. On the power sector, implementation of a willing buyer, willing seller policy has opened up opportunities for increased delivery of electricity to underserved homes and industries. We are also executing a number of critical projects through the transmission, rehabilitation, and expansion program, which will result in achieving the national goal of improved power supply by 2025. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on 16th August 2021, I signed the much-awaited Petroleum Industry Bill 2021 into law. The Act provides legal, governance, regulatory, and fiscal framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry, as well as the development of host communities and related matters. To ensure speedy implementation of PIA, I have directed the Implementation Committee to complete all processes for the successful operationalization of the Act within 12 months. As part of the efforts towards strengthening our national security, we have increased investment in arms, weapons, and other necessary equipment, expanded the National Command and Control Center to 19 states of the Federation, and established a Nigerian Police Trust Fund, which will significantly improve funding for the Nigerian Police Force. We have also approved the sum of 13.3 billion naira for the takeoff of the community policing initiative across the country as part of measures adopted to consolidate efforts aimed at enhancing security nationwide. To address our over-dependence on other countries for military equipment and logistics, I have instructed the Defense Ministry to create a modest military industrial complex for the local production of weapons to meet some of the requirements of the country's armed forces. This is being implemented under the Defense Industries Corporation of Nigeria, a military department responsible for arms manufacture. It is gratifying to note that only recently we have received 6 A-29 Super Tucano aircraft as part of our efforts to boost the nation's campaign against insecurity. The propeller-driven aircraft are being used for training and attack by the military. Efforts are also being made to empower the youth and other vulnerable groups by enhancing investments in our social intervention programs. To achieve this, I have approved the expansion of the National Social Register, which is the official database for the implementation of the Conditional Cash Transfer Program by 1 million additional households. We have established the 75 billion naira Nigerian Youth Investment Fund created to boost the Nigerian economy through leverage and access to finance for youth. The fund should serve as a catalyst to unleash the potential of the youth and to enable them to build businesses that will stimulate economic growth and create jobs. These accomplishments are a testament to the fact that all hands are on deck in establishing a solid foundation for even greater successes in future. Distinguished guests and participants, to address our current economic challenges and consolidate on our achievements over the past year, this retreat has been designed to A, review the performance of each minister in delivering the ministerial mandates, including programs and projects assigned to them upon their appointment in 2019. B, identify key impediments to implementation. And C, re-strategize on how to accelerate delivery of results given the current economic situation. The retreat will also provide the opportunity to effectively evaluate the activities of the ministries over the last 2 years in delivering our promise to Nigerians. Ministers are urged to work closely with permanent secretaries to ensure accelerated and effective delivery of the policies, programs, and projects in their respective priority areas. I have also directed the Secretary to the Government of the Federation to consolidate efforts at strengthening the work of the delivery unit under his coordination towards ensuring the effective implementation of government policies, programs, and projects during the remaining period of this administration. All issues relating to the implementation of the ministerial mandates must be taken seriously by all ministers and permanent secretaries towards the attainment of the laudable objectives of our government. In our continuing drive to ensure accountability, we have incorporated a performance management framework into the functions of the Central Delivery Coordination Unit for ease of tracking of the ministerial deliverables along the lines of the 9 priority areas of this administration. This initiative has provided me the opportunity to track the performance of all ministries and, by extension, this administration. This process has been in effect since January 2021, and today it gives me great pleasure to unveil the performance management system and dashboard to track projects in real time with live data and early warning system to proactively resolve bottlenecks. I wish to finally encourage optimal participation and contribution by all participants throughout this retreat. I look forward to a very fruitful session and stimulating exchange of views on this note. It is my pleasure to formally declare this retreat open and unveil the Prudential Priority Performance Management System. Thank you. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Shall we please be seated? Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. President. And thank you, Your Excellency, the Vice President and Secretary to the Government of the Federation, who accompanied Mr. President to do the unveiling. Distinguished participants, the next item in our program is to listen to progress report on the Economic Sustainability Plan implementation. And that will come from the person who oversees that plan, His Excellency, the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo.
We're still watching the midterm ministerial performance review retreat here at the banquet hall of the State House. The President has just addressed the nation and talked about the 9 key priority areas. And what appears quite unique is the official unveiling of the performance management system and dashboard to track projects in real time and live data. So that is quite novel. It would afford Nigerians the opportunity to actually monitor this closely, monitor performances, projects, and evaluate independently what the federal government is doing towards attaining its 9 priority areas. Just a reminder, the 9 priority areas include stabilizing the macroeconomy, achieving agriculture and food security, ensure energy sufficiency in power and petroleum products, improve transportation and other infrastructure, drive industrialization, improve health, education and productivity, enhance social inclusion and reduce poverty. There's also fighting corruption and improve governance, improve security for all. This is an expansion of the 3 core areas that the federal government, this administration, came in with in 2015 and 2019. You would recall that in 2015 and 2019, the 3 major areas campaigned upon was improving the economy, tackling insecurity, and fighting corruption. These are the areas the President is reiterating today. This performance review retreat is considered very crucial to the present administration and its future successes, at least for the remaining 19 months of the present administration. The President had earlier said in August that he would not want to retire office a failure, and that is quite huge, a very compelling statement. And of course, he would not want that promise to be dashed. And that is why this is deemed very critical towards achieving many of what he has promised, majorly on the 9 key priority areas. We expect that the Vice President will come up to talk more about the progress report on the Economic Sustainability Plan. Implementation of that plan is also considered very, very crucial at this point. He last year gave an overview of the 2.3 trillion naira Economic Sustainability Plan, which is a direct response of the federal government to the ravages of COVID-19. And so how the government is using this to advance Nigerians and advance the cause of Nigeria is very key at this point, very fundamental. There will be a lot of brainstorming, identifying challenges and prospects, recommendations made over the next 2 days. At this plenary as well, we'll see key contributions towards bringing to fruition the vision and securing deliverables for this present government. Don't forget, just 19 months to go. I mean, there's a short latitude here. The federal government must deliver quite in time.
Thank you very much. Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Senate, distinguished Senator Ahmed Lawan, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, members of the Federal Executive Council present, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, the Chief of Staff to the President, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, Head of the Civil Service of the Federation, Dr. Folashade Yemi Eson, Governor of the Central Bank, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Hajia Amina Mohammed, the British High Commissioner to Nigeria, Her Excellency Katrina Lang, and other members of the diplomatic corps present. The President, African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. Heads of federal government agencies and parastatals present, captains of industry, distinguished resource persons and panelists, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just begin by saying that I hope we'll be able to see a full presentation and will receive copies of the full presentation. That is already on the monitor, but what I will do is to simply speak to the presentation and refer to the slides, a couple of slides to save time. So at the end of 2019, our economy was looking very good indeed. We had had 4 quarters of consecutive GDP growth, and all the fundamentals, the macroeconomic fundamentals, looked excellent. And we were well on our way to much faster growth. Then COVID-19 struck. And if we go to slide 4, you will see, we can see the devastating impact of COVID-19 on the economy. GDP contracted to minus 6.10% during the second quarter of 2020. Oil price at one point fell even below production costs, about $10 a barrel, and then finally settled at about $45 a barrel during the second quarter of 2020. The official rate of the naira was devalued from 305 naira to the dollar, then to 380 naira to the dollar. And this was by the third quarter of 2020. Unemployment went up to 33.3% in the fourth quarter of 2020. And in slide 5, you can also see, there were sharp declines in some key sectors. Transportation sector declined by 49%. Hospitality fell by 40%. The education sector fell by 24%. Real estate declined by 22%. Trade declined by 17%, and construction by 40%. So clearly we were in a terrible economic situation, and all brought upon us by the pandemic. I think it's very important to put in context, just the enormity of the shocks that we experienced, because even a 5% decline in any sector of the economy is significant. So clearly, where you get 40% decline, where you get 49% in transportation, for example, 40% in construction. I mean, that is deep, especially as the country was just pulling out of an earlier recession. And this is also in the context of the security challenges that we're facing in different zones of the country. So the total picture at the time was certainly very dire. In response, the president took two actions. The first was to set up a small interministerial committee headed by the Minister of Finance to quickly examine the implications of and the immediate mitigation steps that would be taken for the economic shocks that we were experiencing. The second step which Mr. President took was to ask that we draw up a full economic sustainability plan to provide at least a 12-month response to the fallout of the pandemic. And Mr. President asked me to chair the committee to draw up the plan and later to implement the plan. We were clear that the only way, and Mr. President's position also, was that the only way of avoiding an economic disaster that could last for years was for government to essentially put forward a major fiscal stimulus plan with clear objectives of saving jobs, creating new ones, supporting businesses that may close down, and employees that may not be paid during the lockdowns, and of course, healthcare support to reduce the COVID-19 caseload. So the objectives of the plan are set out in slide 8. If you look at slide 8, the objectives of the plan are set out there. First, improved healthcare and lowering the COVID-19 caseload. The second was restoring growth. The third, job creation and safeguarding existing jobs. The fourth, increased local production, and part of that was what we call the guaranteed offtake scheme. The fifth was reducing social vulnerabilities, and that essentially was looking at how to improve the quality and effectiveness of the social investment program and the scope of the program as part of the improving social vulnerabilities. The size of the stimulus, or the cost of the plan, was 2.3 trillion. And slide 10 will show us how we planned to raise that 2.3 trillion naira. And this was all very carefully worked out. At the Economic Sustainability Committee, we looked very carefully at the different models and how much money we thought will be able to get us back into growth and out of recession quickly. And were assisted by the MBS and, of course, the Ministry of Finance also assisted greatly in setting up a model that could describe to us and tell us as nearly accurate as possible how much will be required to get us out of the recession and, of course, to get us back to a path of sustainable growth. So the sources of funding, after we had decided there was 2.3 trillion, were one, from special accounts, 500 billion from special accounts. Now, these special accounts is just a way of describing different government accounts that we thought we could draw from. So essentially what we were doing was wiring money from different government accounts and pulling them into one account so that we could use that as a first bit of money that we could get in order to finance the 2.3 trillion. Then there was lending from the CBN, structured lending from the CBN, to the tune of 1.22 trillion naira. Now, this lending, of course, is completely different from ways and means. This lending was supposed to come through CRR and through the banking system itself. So essentially what we were supposed to do, what we were getting from the CBN, was on lending to banks, which would then be lent to the businesses and to the sectors of the economy that we thought would require the lending. Then from bilateral and multilateral agencies, another 334 billion, and other funding sources, 300 billion. I'll come back to slides 11 and 13 later. So we set up some priority clusters, areas of activity that could be grouped together for planning purposes. And in slide 9, you'll see the priority clusters. So the priority clusters were mitigating the shock. That was a cluster. How do we mitigate the shock, the immediate steps to be taken? Tackling vulnerabilities, which of course is the social investment program. Job-intensive interventions. In other words, programs designed to create and sustain jobs. And we'll come to that in a moment. then rescuing businesses, which was the MSME Survival Fund, etc., then repositioning the economy. And we then took also what we described as cross-cutting imperatives for a post-COVID economic recovery. We thought that perhaps it was also an opportunity for us to do certain things, or to put certain things in the fore, which even after the initial, after our initial interventions and getting away from the economic shocks, would be required for us to be able to put the economy on a path of sustained growth. The 6 priority clusters enabled programs to be compartmentalized in buckets with clear targets. So in slide 14, I think it's slide 14, yes, we have some of the fiscal and monetary measures which were taken to help mitigate the impact of the pandemic. So the fiscal measures included the extension of the deadline and suspension of penalties for filing late returns, for example. The conversion of the World Bank $82 million REDICE program to support COVID-19 interventions in the state. So we asked the World Bank to allow us to convert that $82 million program to give individual states money so that they could build up their healthcare facilities, set up their laboratories, and do a few other things that were required as an emergency measure. And the World Bank consented to that, so we were able to distribute the $82 million to the different states. The provision of an $86 billion intervention fund for health infrastructure, and that came directly from our $500 billion from the special accounts. Payment of an incentive package for frontline healthcare workers. That, of course, also came from the $500 billion. And then the grant of an additional moratorium of 1 year on CBN intervention facilities. So the CBN intervention facilities that had been given to various businesses, the CBN graciously consented to a reduction to a 1-year moratorium for payments, so that they were then able to defer payment on their loans for at least a year. Of course, that was subsequently extended when we found that would not be adequate. Then there was a reduction in interest rates on intervention facilities which the CBN had given. The CBN gave those intervention facilities at 9%. So there was a reduction as part of the plan to make life easier for businesses to 5%, from 9% to 5%. Then there was also a grant of regulatory forbearance to banks to give borrowers some breathing space, including through restructuring of outstanding debts. In other words, businesses that wanted their loans restructured, businesses that felt that they were no longer able to keep up payments of their loans to banks, the CBN gave a regulatory forbearance, in other words, allowed the banks to be able to look at their loan structures and restructure where that was required. In other words, the CBN granted a forbearance on non-performing loans. So the CBN also, and these are some of the interventions that the CBN reports, a disbursement of 3.9 million smallholder farms. This was under the Anchor Borrowers Program, about 789 billion. The CBN reports was spent on the Anchor Borrowers Program. Now, the Anchor Borrowers Program, of course, was not a part of the Economic Sustainability Plan in that way, but it obviously affected the way that, first of all, the general amounts of money that were released in the system, and of course was a continuous program, and it flowed also into the Economic Sustainability Plan. There was also another 134.6 billion to 38,140 beneficiaries under the AGS MIS scheme, and 343 billion to 726,158 beneficiaries. And I'm looking here at CBN's own direct interventions. And the release of over ₦1 trillion to 269 real sector projects in all. 103 billion disbursed to 110 healthcare projects. Now, these, of course, are the CBN's own releases. CBN's own interventions. Some of the fiscal measures have been taken to safeguard oil revenues, mobilize and preserve non-oil revenues, and rationalize government expenditure. These were steps taken essentially by the Ministry of Finance. But a major component of the plan was, of course, to build a resilient healthcare system. And this remains a critical objective of as the pandemic, of course, is still raging. So if you look at slide 15, the funds allocated to the health sector were for surveillance and epidemiology, establishing laboratories, point of entry management, infection prevention and control, case management, health-related communications, research and development. And after full implementation, what we expect to see, although already we've seen several of these, 52 federal tertiary health institutions, the availability of PPEs in all federal tertiary institutions, 520 ICU beds, 52 isolation wards with 1,040 beds, 52 molecular laboratories to carry out, on the average, 150 PCR tests every day. I think it's important to point out that these are federal government interventions. These are not state interventions. Of course, the states were also building up their own capacity. But what I've just described are the federal government's own specific interventions and the results of those interventions. Of course, we know that vaccines are being administered across the 36 states of Nigeria today. And as of 28 September 2021, 4.8 million people, or 4.3% of the eligible population, had received the first dose of vaccines. 1.9 million people, or about 1.8% of the eligible population, have received the second dose. We've already received, and we're also expecting significant quantities of vaccines in the coming weeks and months. So I'll go now to the MSME Survival Fund. And as I had noted earlier, one of the important things that we considered was rescuing businesses, keeping businesses afloat. And the particular program that was designed for that was designed by the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, and was described as the MSME Survival Fund. Now, if you go to slide 16, this is the layout of the program. Now, the programs were designed to create and safeguard existing jobs. So we have the Guaranteed Offtake Scheme, the Payroll Support Scheme, the Artisan and Transport Support Scheme, the General MSME Grant, and then Formalization of Companies Support Scheme. The MSME programs had, in all, as of today, supported 1.1 million people and businesses as follows. Direct grants were given for a 3-month period to 459 beneficiaries across the country. In other words, salaries of 449,000 people were paid for a 3-month period. We had representations from several sectors. For example, teachers, private school teachers, there's an association of private school teachers. They were very interested in ensuring that teachers remained paid during the period. Of course, public school teachers were being paid, but private school teachers also wanted to be paid. So they formed a significant portion of the 459,000 of those who were paid as part of that fund. And these, of course, were persons who then received between 90,000 and 150,000 in salaries for the 3-month period. Then 293,000 transport workers and artisans received a one-off grant of 30,000 naira each. 293,000, these were artisans and transport workers. They received a one-off grant of 30,000 naira. Then from the MSME general grants, 82,000 businesses also received one-off grants, 82,000 businesses. And then 255,000 enterprises benefited from the CAC free registration of companies scheme. This was called the formalization scheme. So what simply happened here was that in companies, persons who wanted to register their companies, 255,000 of them were allowed to register those companies free. And so in effect, the federal government paid for the registration of those companies. Then we have the Agric and the Agric program. We called it Agriculture for Food and Jobs, the Agriculture for Food and Jobs plan. And this is in slide 17. And this is also a very major pillar of the plan, because we thought that mass agriculture, doing something extra for agriculture, would provide jobs and food. So part of that program was the enumeration of farmers. And we enumerated 6.39 million farmers, and these farmers were geotagged to their land. So you could actually, so today we have accurate records verified by the Ministry of Communications and Digital Technology, accurate records of 6.39 million farmers with their farmlands actually geotagged. So we know exactly where their farms are, we know exactly where they were. And so far, 363 million passed the first stage of validation, and another 2.47 million passed the second stage of validation. Now we're validating them also and also BVNs. They are being, those who do not have BVNs are getting BVNs and all of that. 320 hectares of land has been cleared across 8 states at 40 hectares per state. Now there are several states, of course, that are involved in the project. The states are Kwara, Plateau, Cross River, Edo, Kaduna, Ekiti, and Osun states. These are states that require land clearing. Of course, many states do not require land clearing, and we simply supported those states directly. 447 billion naira is allocated as loans to farmers across 14 crop value chains: beef production, aquaculture, and poultry farming. But so far, only 14 billion has been disbursed to commercial banks. And even this sum is yet to be utilized by farmers due to the late release for the 2021 wet farming season. And I'll come to that in a moment, because we've had some complications, especially with the structured loans that we're supposed to get coming from the CBN to the commercial banks. Then we have the fertilizer subsidy program, which is a very important and critical part of this Food for Jobs program. Because prior, what has happened is that fertilizer has always been a problem, and paying for fertilizer and all of that has always been a problem, and being able to assist farmers. But this program was designed, and Mr. President approved a program of giving subsidies to farmers for bags of fertilizer to each farmer, and depending on the size of the farm. But the strategy here was to give the farmer the amount of the subsidy directly in cash, paid to their BVN verified account. So each farmer that was going to get a subsidy would have this money paid directly to his BVN verified account. And Mr. President approved the disbursement of the fertilizer subsidy fund to smallholder vulnerable farmers in the country. A subsidy of 5.1 billion was paid to 1,013,126 farmers. This is lower than previously reported due to the removal of about 184,000 of them who did not have BVN verified accounts at the time. But the subsidy payment is an evidence-based payment tied to farmer enumeration. So a farmer receives 4 bags of NPK per hectare. So a farmer with 5 acres or 2 hectares gets a subsidy of 24,000 naira paid directly to his account for the 8 bags of NPK that will be needed. A farmer who owns 1 acre or less gets a subsidy of 3,000 naira. And as I said, this is paid directly to the farmers. So that has helped a great deal in ensuring that subsidies actually get to the farmers and they are able to benefit directly from the subsidy. So when they buy, and they can go anywhere, of course, to buy their NPK, which is already available. But rather than relying on sellers or relying on third parties or anybody to provide that subsidy, they already have the subsidy. So when they go and buy, they're already at either 3,000, between 3,000 and 24,000 in credit. The next is the social housing program. Now, the social housing program was also designed to create thousands of jobs and boost the local building materials industry. The whole idea was to build 300,000 houses, and so far, we have over 1,151 hectares of land. This has been made ready for development, and this has the capacity to accommodate about 34,550 homes. The program is funded by a mix of resources, and I think this is also a point that I'll come back to. It includes financing from the Federal Ministry of Finance under the Social Investment Program, the Family Homes Fund, and a loan from the Central Bank under the Economic Sustainability Plan, which is supposed to be in the order of about 200 billion naira. Buyers have a window of at least 15 years to pay for their homes. The design is to build 2-bedroom homes costing not more than 2 million naira. So if you're going to buy the 3-bedroom homes, it'd be 3.75 million, and 4.25 million for a 4-room unit. But the cheapest is a 2 million naira home. And at first, of course, there were very many arguments. It wasn't possible to build a home for 2 million. But we've not only tested it, we've built it. As a matter of fact, Borno State now has 8,000 such units. They are way ahead of others. They built 8,000 units of these homes. And the homes are specifically designed to meet the cultural needs of the places where they are built. So in Borno, for example, the way that the houses are structured is completely different from the way that they are structured in Nasarawa State, for example. And I think that the Borno State has set, an example and shown that it is entirely possible to do this and to build very, very quickly using local raw materials, using local artisans, and of course, doing so at great speed. At the moment also, 4,700 homes have been approved in 7 states for financing for commencement in October. Another 5,400 are scheduled for commencement in November of this year. Progress has been much slower than envisaged. There are continuing delays in disbursement of funds between the CBN and the commercial banks. We've had serious delays. Now, the debenture agreement for the sum of 200 billion, because we had to go into a debenture agreement with the CBN in order to be able to ensure that these funds were not just dissipated and there will be no possibility of paying back. But of course, the CBN's loan represents the largest bulk of the financing. But we've signed the debenture agreement since April, and of course, we're still waiting for disbursements to fully commence. Solar electrification program is another limb of this creation of jobs, and at the same time, adding value to the quality of lives of the people. So the solar electrification scheme, and this is in slide 19, is designed to create several jobs and develop a local solar industry, even as it increases energy access across 5 million new solar connections. It will include the assembly and manufacturing of components of off-grid solutions to facilitate the growth of the local manufacturing industry, while the use of local content will be encouraged. And we expect that in all, it should create 250,000 new jobs in the energy sector. For funding purposes, the program has been broken to 5 categories: 57 billion naira in guarantor projects. In other words, we're asking some of the federal government agencies, the NDPHC, the NMPC, to guarantee certain portions of the whole program. And so far, we have guarantees from the NMPC and also from the NDPHC. So those guarantees are worth 57 billion. In effect, the producers, the installers of the solar connections can go ahead and connect 57 billion naira worth of solar products upon the guarantees of these 2 agencies. Then there's a 20 billion in small scale downstream, 20 billion in commercial bank upstream projects. These are all projects supported by the commercial banks. and then 28 billion for state guaranteed projects. Adamawa, Akwa Ibom states, for example, are guaranteeing their own projects to the tune of about 28 billion. And 15 billion in commercial bank downstream projects. Now, when I say a guarantee, of course, they are not putting cash on the table, but they are placing guarantees with commercial banks to say that if money is not paid back, if they are not able to get money back, then they then they, of course, are the primary obligors. Now, the way that this works is that each solar connection is not a free gift because it is installed by a private solar company. And what happens is that where a solar connection is made, the recipient of the solar connection also makes payments on a monthly basis. And what we found across the country is that so long as power is steady, everyone is required to pay. The rate of default is almost zero. Everybody is prepared to pay so long as there's power. And we had experimented with this previously in several market settings. For example, we experimented with it in Sabongari market, in Ariaria market, where we had thousands of stalls installed with solar power, and every one of them, there's just absolutely no rate of default. In any event, if you default, your connection is cut off. So it's a very effective program, and everyone and those who have benefited from it are extremely happy with it, and it is also a sustainable program. Unfortunately, again, funds have been very slow in coming. We've had difficulties with accessing most of the funds because, again, as I've said, these are CBN to commercial banks and commercial banks to the private companies that have to do this. Of the 140 billion that we're supposed to receive, so far we've received only 7 billion. That's only 7 billion naira has been disbursed. Although we have 42 billion worth of transactions have been fully closed and fully deployed, and we're just waiting for that to happen, which will lead to 704,000 connections. A further 46 billion in transactions are in very advanced stages, and that will lead to another 600,000 in connections. We expect that in the next coming weeks and months, we'll be able to move very quickly on the solar connections as the banks get more, as the banks are able to get more confident to be able to give those funds which the CBN is supposed to guarantee. The key challenges, of course, are the problems, as I've said, with disbursements coming from the CBN to the commercial banks and to the users of the funds. Then there's also a risk aversion of public and private financial institutions, particularly for power projects, in addition to a limited knowledge of the off-grid market and its potential. But I think that over time, we're working through this, and I'm very confident that we'll be able to get to a point where everyone is able to have more confidence in the whole process and be sure that their money will come back when they give the money. Lack of access to foreign exchange for the importation of systems and raw materials is also another major problem. Then we have the public works and aviation segments of the plan. And if you go to slide 20, we have all of what is going on in the public works program. About 193 road sections totaling 3,707 kilometers of roads is going on at the moment. 26,021 Nigerians have been employed in rehabilitation and construction of these roads so far. And there's also the construction of 345 kilometers of rural roads, 205 boreholes, and 10 treatment plants to create jobs and develop rural areas. I think it's important to understand that the Public Works Program is also one of those programs that was designed to create jobs in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, to sustain those who, of course, will be unable for one reason or the other to handle their lives or to feed themselves during that period. And a lot of a lot of benefit was derived from that. As a matter of fact, the Honourable Minister of State for Budget and National Planning went around looking at several of these public works projects and sent back live photographs and videos showing the very tremendous amount of work that had been done and the number of people who had been engaged. So in the 36 states and the FCT also, already road construction is at 98% completion with 204 kilometers completed. 774,000 young people have been engaged by the National Directorate of Employment, the NDE. And in the Public Works Program, that's in the Public Works Program. In aviation, the 5 billion was allocated for local airlines, for ground handlers and other aviation-allied businesses aimed at easing the negative economic effects of the pandemic. And the breakdown, I think we have a good account of the breakdown. Scheduled operators got 2.84 billion. Non-scheduled operators, cargo and private jet services got 944 million. Ground operators about 233 billion. In-flight catering services about 233 million, beg your pardon. Aviation fuel operators 233 million. And travel agents another 196 million. Airport hire also 196 million. What are the outcomes of the plan so far? Of course, if you look at the details, if you look at the full presentation, there's so many details, and I'm not going to be able to go into all those details. So I'll just skip quite a few of the details and then just go to the outcomes of the plan so far. I think it's fair to say that the plan has helped to avoid a much more painful economic challenge. And I think that we must commend Mr. President for his foresight and for acting quickly. I think that's the most important part of this, acting very quickly. First of all, in setting up that small committee to assess the damage, and then very quickly going on to the establishment of the economic sustainability plan and having a detailed plan with funding, and then approving that plan also expeditiously so that we're able to move quickly. But for the speed with which this was done, things would of course have been very, very, very bad and much worse. And I think it enabled us, as we've heard, to get out of the recession in record time and much faster than most economies of the world. As a matter of fact, you'll find that most economies of the world were scrambling, trying to find one solution or the other, trying to determine what a fiscal sustainability plan would look like and all of that. But I think that we were able to move very, very quickly under the direction and leadership of Mr. President, and able to put together a plan and act on the plan as quickly as we're able to. Now, slide 12 describes some of the specific outcomes. Revenues, of course, improved despite all production issues. But the macro indices are also trending in the right direction today. And of course, if you've looked at our GDP report, you'll find that definitely things are looking up. Revenues year on year, Federation revenues in Q2 2021 are up by 6%, although much lower than projected in the budget due to problems with production, with oil production. We're producing less than our OPEC quotas, and of course, I'm sure that when we have the presentation from the Ministry of Petroleum, there will also be some additional insights into that, shutdowns or shut-ins in some of the wells, and the various problems of getting them back up have generally tended to reduce our oil revenues, as you will see in the GDP report. Inflation has trended downward over the past 5 months, falling to about 17% during the second quarter of this year, although food inflation, as you know, is still very troubling, and food production and supply has been affected by security challenges. GDP growth performance in the second quarter of this year has been a highlight, with an increase of 5% year on year, the highest since 2015. And I think that this is certainly worth celebrating. External reserves are also improving, but will be much higher, of course, as we go along. Of course, the questions around ensuring that we're able to get supply of dollars. And again, we all have our views on that, and I might say a thing or two about that. Of course, our oversubscribed Eurobond this last cycle has helped a great deal also in beefing up our external reserves. However, given the record high oil prices, the reserves obviously should do better, and I'm sure that those are issues that will be examined in greater detail. Slide 13 shows the sectors that have rebounded to positive growth. Transportation has rebounded to positive growth, 77%. Hospitality, 2%, and that's from negative. Real estate from 40% down to 4%. Trade from about 17% down now to 23%. Construction from 40% down to 4% now. I'll just end the discussion of the challenge with, I'll just end this discussion with some of the challenges of implementing the Economic Sustainability Plan, and just a quick look at future perspectives and funding. With respect to full implementation of the plan, we have seen, of course, that inadequate funding has in some ways hampered what could have obviously been a much, much better performance. Our 500 billion, which was budgeted for and which we took from special accounts, was essentially the major part of the 2.3 trillion program, the major part of it. Of course, CBN interventions also were very helpful, but I want to just point out that the 1.2 trillion, which is supposed to be structured loans, were still very far behind, and that's a significant part of the plan. So that has greatly affected what would have been an even better outcome. The last GDP report presented by the Honourable Minister of Finance also highlighted major challenges to the economy. Of course, unemployment heading for over almost 40%, and loss of jobs since 2018, dwindling oil revenues, and dwindling on account of production. Poor foreign investment inflows, both FDI and FPIs, likely due to exchange rate concerns and uncertainty around the repatriation of profits and security concerns. Now, I think that many of these problems are completely resolvable. I do not think that they constitute any significant, difficulty that we cannot resolve. But I think that one of the most important things is that there must be synergy between the fiscal and the monetary authority. That is absolutely crucial. We must be able to deal with the synergy. We must handle that synergy between the monetary authority, the CBN, and the fiscal side. Sometimes it appears that there is competition between this, especially on the fiscal side. If you look at some of the interventions, you will find that those interventions, there are interventions that should be managed by ministries. So the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment should handle MSME interventions and those kinds of interventions. And we should know what the CBN is doing. In other words, if the CBN is going to intervene in the MSME sector, it should be with the full cooperation and consent of the Ministry of Industries. If they're going to intervene in agriculture, it should be with full consent. So that synergy is absolutely important. The reason why it's important, aside from the fact that you cannot plan an economy in any other way, the more important thing is that sometimes you will get people who are benefiting more than once, because we simply have no line of sight to what's going on one side. CBN doesn't know what we're doing. They don't know what we don't know what they're doing. So I think that is important. That synergy is absolutely important. And as for the exchange rate, I think we need to move our rates to a more reflective market, as reflective of market as possible. This, in my own respectful view, is the only way to improve supply. We can't get new dollars into the system where the exchange rate is artificially low. And everyone knows by how much our reserves can grow. So I'm convinced that the demand management strategy currently being adopted by the CBN, we need to rethink. And that's just my view. But anyway, all that is, all those are issues I'm sure that when the CBN governor has time to address, he'll be able to address in full. But let me say that on the whole, we have been able to weather the storm of a very, very serious economic challenge. And I think that that is largely on account of the stable and steady leadership that we received from Mr. President. I think that if you panic, if Mr. President had panicked in that period, we would have had a lot of difficulty. In fact, perhaps we would be in a much, much worse situation. And I think that he deserves all the commendation for providing that steady hand when that was required. As I said, all told, I think that we are at a point in our economic history where everything is possible. Everything is possible. And I'm completely convinced that even the challenges that we see today are challenges that can be resolved very, very easily, so long as we're all prepared to work together towards the same objectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, the Vice President. You know, when you have a teacher and a pastor combined, it becomes almost unstoppable. Thank you, Your Excellency. That was a voyage through how we got out of recession in record time. He said while other economies in the world were still struggling and grappling, Nigeria was already out of recession. And the formula is called the Economic Sustainability Plan. Thank you, Excellency, Mr. Vice President. The next presentation will come from the man I described earlier as one of our exports to the world. You know, we have many. We have at the World Trade Organization, we have at the UN, and now we have at the Africa Development Bank. The president of that bank is no one else than Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, a former Minister of Agriculture in this country. He's going to speak to us on Nigeria's economic resurgence, learning from the African example. Dr. Adesina, please.
Your Excellency, President Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Your Excellency, Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, my dear brother, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, thank you for that tour de force of your presentation. The President of the Senate, Dr. Ahmed Lawan, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Gbajabiamila, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, my dear brother, Boss Mustafa, and thank you very much for everything you did to facilitate my trip here today. The Chief of Staff to His Excellency the President, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, Honorable Ministers, the Head of Service of the Federation, Dr. Yemi Eslam. Many of you may not know, but we actually grew up together. We are almost in-laws, in case you want to know. Permanent secretaries, captains of the industry, members of the diplomatic corps, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Mr. President, for inviting me to be a guest speaker on the theme, Nigeria's Economic Resurgence, learning from the African experience at this year's midterm Ministerial Performance Review retreat. As we meet today, the world continues to deal with the effects of global COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has caused so many deaths and upended global economic growth. Due to COVID-19, Nigeria's economic growth, that we just listened to, actually declined to minus 1.8% in 2020. This mirrors the pattern across Africa, as the continent posted a negative 2.1% growth rate in GDP, the worst in 2 decades. The African Development Bank responded rapidly in supporting African countries. We launched a $10 billion crisis response facility to support countries. We provided $289 million in budget support to Nigeria. And as I was listening to His Excellency the Vice President, I was just computing in my head at 358.8 naira to the dollar. That would be about roughly 104 billion naira, which would be about 31% of all the 334 billion that you said. So, Mr. President, we did provide very, very robust support. The GDP growth rate for the continent will recover to 3.4% this year. We project economic growth rate for Nigeria will rebound to 2.4% this year and reach 2.9% by 2022. But the recovery will depend on 2 critical issues: access to vaccines and tackling debt issues. Africa has only 2% of its population vaccinated, compared to 54% in the United States and 75% in Europe. So while the developed countries are receiving booster shots, African countries cannot get even basic shots. Nigeria must build quality healthcare systems that will protect its population today and well into the future. Nigeria must also build world-class local pharmaceutical industries, and I emphasize local, able to effectively tackle the production of therapeutic drugs and vaccines. Here is the lesson. Nigeria must revamp its local pharmaceutical industry and launch strategic investments for local vaccine manufacturing. Africa should not be begging for vaccines. Africa should be producing vaccines. The African Development Bank will invest $3 billion in support of local pharmaceutical industries in Africa, including in Nigeria. Your Excellencies, Nigeria must decisively tackle its debt challenges. The issue is not about debt to GDP ratio, as Nigeria's debt to GDP ratio at 35% is actually still moderate. The big issue is how to service the debt and what that means for resources for domestic investments needed to spur faster economic growth. The debt service to revenue ratio for Nigeria is high at 73%. Things will of course improve as oil prices recover, but the situation has revealed the vulnerability of Nigeria's economy. To have economic resurgence, we need to fix the structure of the economy and address some basic fundamentals. Nigeria's challenge is revenue concentration. As the oil sector accounts for roughly 75% of export revenue, and according to the statistics of the Central Bank, 50% of all government revenue. What is needed for sustained growth and economic resurgence is to remove the structural bottlenecks that limit the productivity and revenue earning potential of the huge non-oil sectors. Here is the lesson. Nigeria should significantly boost productivity and revenues from its non-oil sector with appropriate and synergistic fiscal and macroeconomic policies, especially flexible market-based exchange rates, that will enhance international competitiveness. Your Excellencies, infrastructure is critical for unlocking the full potential of Nigeria's economy. Nigeria will need $15 billion a year for investment in infrastructure. Financial innovations should be prioritized, as governments alone cannot afford these huge financial costs. The private sector should be given more incentives to invest in infrastructure. The federal government's 15 trillion naira infrastructure fund is a brilliant idea. So is the initiative for tax credits for private sector investments in infrastructure. And I was sitting next to my brother Aliko Dangote over there, and Aliko, just to let you know that I went on one of those roads that you built, and it looked like M25 road built in the UK, so we should do more of those. To be sustainable and more efficient, public-private partnerships, or PPPs, should be accelerated to finance major infrastructure all across Nigeria. Nigeria's institutional investors, especially these pension funds, should invest in infrastructure. Governments can also implement infrastructure asset recycling models, where existing infrastructure assets on government books can be turned over to the private sector, freeing up financing for governments to invest in new infrastructure needs. Here is the lesson. Sustainable financing approaches such as PPPs and infrastructure asset recycling will allow Nigeria to attract significant private sector investment into infrastructure. Your Excellencies, this brings me to the issue of trade, investment, and competitiveness. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area presents a major opportunity for Nigeria. Consumer and business expenditures in Africa are projected to rise to $6.7 trillion by 2030. Significant support, therefore, should be directed towards boosting industrial manufacturing capacities. Nigeria should also move rapidly to the top of selected value chains, such as automobiles, computers and electronics, textiles and garments, and food manufacturing, transport, and logistics. Much, Your Excellencies, will depend on the ports of Nigeria. According to the sector operators, the cost of exporting 100 tons of cargo in Nigeria is $35,000, compared to just $4,000 in Ghana. Today, the leading ports of West Africa are in Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Togo, and Benin Republic. All of these countries have modernized their port management systems, leaving Nigeria far behind. Nigeria can learn from Morocco's world-class Tangier Med port. The port is unique in that it is an industrial port complex, a platform that has over 1,100 companies. They collectively exported over 8 billion euros worth of goods in 2020. Companies located at the Tangier Med port have allowed Morocco to move up the global value chains, including automobiles, automotive parts, aeronautics, agriculture, and food manufacturing, textiles, and logistics. Annually, over 460,000 cars are manufactured in the zone of these ports. And more interesting is that the bulk of the human resources to do all of this are Moroccans. Mr. President, I took a walk myself at the Tangier Med port. I actually thought they were on vacation, as I did not see people, just machines, haulers, automated systems moving containers in what looked like a well-synchronized maze with incredible efficiency. There were no kilometers of trucks waiting to get to the port. Your Excellency, We should not be decongesting the ports in Nigeria. We should be transforming the ports. This must start with cleaning up administrative bottlenecks, most of which are unnecessary, with multiple government agencies at the ports, high transaction costs, or even plain extortion from illegal taxes, which do not go into the coffers of the government where the revenue is badly needed. Here is the lesson. Nigeria should rapidly modernize and transform its ports. Ports are not there for revenue generation. They are for facilitating business and exports and stimulating industrial manufacturing and competitiveness of local businesses and exports. Your Excellencies, you knew this was coming. Agriculture, I can't give a talk without talking of agriculture. We must boost food security, reduce the price of food, and ensure greater competitiveness of Nigeria's agricultural sector. When I was Minister of Agriculture, we deployed a highly innovative mobile phone system to reach farmers with subsidized farm inputs, a program called Growth Enhancement Scheme and the e-wallet system. To be clear, this was the first time in the world that such a system was deployed to reach farmers with subsidized farm inputs via mobile phones. And it worked. It brought in transparency. It brought in accountability. It brought in all the major commercial banks. More importantly, it delivered impressive results and led to massive food production. It reached 15 million farmers with high-quality seeds and fertilizers right in their villages. Nigeria's food production boomed and expanded by an additional 21 million metric tons. The rice revolution started then in Kebbi State and the Northwest as we deployed innovative high-quality seeds for Faro 44 and Faro 52 rice, which we introduced to Nigeria from the Africa Rice Center. I remember visiting Hadejia Valley Irrigation Project in Jigawa State. As women farmers told me, "Thank you, Minister. We get our seeds and fertilizers right here in our villages by our mobile phones," and they emphasized, "The men cannot cheat us anymore." I was elated. Prices of food fell and productivity went up. The Growth Enhancement Scheme and the e-wallet system has now been adopted in Central Asia, in Togo, in Liberia, and several African countries. Yet, in Nigeria, where they were developed, they are no longer being implemented. Your Excellency, Mr. President, you will have people telling you it is a lack of rain that is leading to low food production. A little, maybe. That it is insecurity. Yes, maybe. To some extent. That it is middlemen. A little, maybe. For Your Excellency, Mr. President, the main reason is that farmers no longer have access to quality improved seeds and fertilizers and farm inputs at scale. Farmers across the country are asking for the federal government to restore, in their words, and I quote, the popular Growth Enhancement Support Scheme and the e-wallet system. The chairman of the All Farmers Association of Nigeria, AFAN, Alhaji Farouk Moody, said in March 2020, and I quote, "These initiatives, Growth Enhancement Support Scheme and the e-wallet system, should be restored by the federal government. They will boost farmers' production, create jobs, and increase internally generated revenue for the states." I would like to urge Your Excellency, Mr. President, please relaunch the Growth Enhancement Scheme and the e-wallet system. It will put millions of farmers at the heart of your drive for agriculture at scale. If it is done and run well, I can assure you that you will have even greater dramatic turnaround in national food production. Your Excellency, Mr. President, the African Development Bank has helped to finance the revolution of wheat in Sudan with heat-tolerant varieties by producing 65,000 metric tons of seed. To give you a sense of the magnitude of this, let me say that the largest airplane, the Airbus 380 aircraft, fully loaded with passengers, with its fuel and cargo, weighs 98.4 metric tons. So 65,000 tons of heat-tolerant wheat in Sudan is the equivalent of 660 Airbus 380 aircraft packed on a landing strip. The impact was dramatic. In just 2 seasons, we helped Sudan to cultivate these heat-tolerant varieties of wheat on 317,000 hectares, which produced 1.1 million tons of wheat. The Prime Minister of Sudan, who you know very well, Mr. President, Abdallah Hamdok, said with this intervention, the country moved from 25% self-sufficiency to 54% in just 2 seasons. Sudan expects to become a net exporter of wheat within 3 years. We also supported Ethiopia to cultivate heat-tolerant varieties on over 184,000 hectares. Interestingly, these same heat-tolerant wheat varieties were introduced to Nigeria when I was Minister of Agriculture, and we worked hard to give them to farmers in the Lake Chad Basin. Your Excellency, Mr. President, you may wish to know that during the insecurity in the area, my staff at the time at the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, led by one Dr. Oluwashina Olabanji, the then executive director of the Lake Chad Research Institute, and his team, they stayed in the fields. They protected the seeds. They multiplied literally with their lives. They risked their lives on those fields. When insecurity became much more serious, they moved the varieties to Kadawa Valley in Kano. Dr. Olabanji, Your Excellency, Mr. President, it's my humble submission, will deserve a national award. I was on the farms in Kano with several Seriki nomas or farmer heads. They could not believe that wheat could be as tall as they were. These varieties yielded 5 tons per hectare compared to the average of 1.5 tons per hectare. That is an increase of 400%. Nigeria should take advantage of the work of the bank on this and scale up cultivation of heat-tolerant wheat varieties all across northern Nigeria. Your Excellency, Mr. President, it is time to also take bold policy measures to drive the structural transformation of agriculture with infrastructure and spatial economic policies. The key for this is the development of special agro-industrial processing zones, SAPZs, across the country. There will be zones enabled with infrastructure and logistics to support the private sector, food and agriculture companies, to locate close to the areas of production, to process and add value to food and agricultural commodities. They will change the rural economies from being zones of economic misery to zones of new economic prosperity. The African Development Bank and our partners have already mobilized $520 million towards this program. We are working very closely with the federal government, 7 state governments, the Federal Capital Territory, the Ministries of Finance, Agriculture, Trade, Industry and Investment, Water Resources, and the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority on the design of these special agro-industrial processing zones. They are expected to create at least 1.5 million jobs. Here is the lesson. Nigeria should establish special agro-industrial processing zones all across the country. The e-wallet system and the growth enhancement scheme to boost farmers' access to productivity-enhancing inputs at scale should be reinstated and enshrined in law. And I see the Speaker and also the President of the Senate here. Policy reversals should be avoided. I talked recently to the new Minister of Agriculture, Honorable President. He called me and he and I had almost an hour conversation. He told me when he came to see you, his weight was 76.5 kilograms. He said when he left your office, his weight was 210 kilograms. That you told him so much he had to do, he gained so much weight. I don't know if you are here, Honorable Minister of Agriculture. I hope what I'm saying is correct. I just want to tell you that you will have my maximum support. Your Excellencies, we must unleash the potential of the youth of Nigeria. Today, over 75% of the population is under the age of 35. More decisive actions are needed to turn this demographic asset into an economic dividend. A young, productive, youthful population with access to education, skills, social protection, affordable housing, and medical care will power Nigeria's economy now and well into the future. We must move away from the so-called youth empowerment programs. The youth do not need handouts. They need investments. I would therefore like to commend you, Mr. President, for your decision to establish the Youth Investment Fund. That is why also the African Development Bank is currently working with central banks and countries all across the continent to design and support the establishment of what we call Youth Entrepreneurship Investment Banks. These will be new financial institutions run by young, professional, and highly competent financial experts and bankers to develop and deploy new financial products and services for businesses and ventures of young people. Several African countries have already indicated their readiness to establish youth entrepreneurship investment banks. Here is the lesson. Nigeria should make its youth the drivers of the new economy through the creation of youth entrepreneurship investment banks that puts new financial ecosystems around them to fully unleash their potential. This will take the Youth Investment Fund, which you have established, Mr. President, it will take it to scale, it will institutionalize it, and it will make it sustainable. Your Excellencies, one of the industries that will dominate the future is the fintech industry. By 2030, 650 million Africans will have smartphones, and 50 million will have 5G phone networks. Digital payments, mobile money accounts, savings, credit, and money transfers will revolutionize businesses. Nigeria's fintech is surging as one of the leaders in Africa today. Google recently announced plans to invest $1 billion in Africa. That tells you something. They see the demographic and mobile tech growth and how this will rapidly change the future of e-commerce, trade, health, and finance. Your Excellency, Mr. President, the African Development Bank will support the federal government's efforts, being led by His Excellency Vice President Osinbajo, on the digital Nigeria. The bank is preparing investment in digital and creative enterprises, which is called iDice, Your Excellency, Mr. Vice President, a program that is $600 million worth of investment to be co-financed with several partners. These will promote entrepreneurship and innovation in the digital technology and creative industries. Here is the lesson. Nigeria should take the fintech industry as a major driver of the economy and invest heavily in digital infrastructure. Your Excellencies, an economically resurgent Nigeria must be a more peaceful and secure Nigeria. Today, more than ever, several African countries are spending a significant share of their budgets on security, displacing resources needed for development. Increasingly as well, the investable space in many parts of Africa, including Nigeria, is shrinking due to insecurity and insurgencies. Yet, resources are not there to enable countries to cope with these rising challenges. We must therefore recognize the strong linkages between security, investment, growth, and development. And that is why the African Development Bank is working on developing security-indexed investment bonds to help countries and regional economic communities to mobilize resources to tackle these challenges. The security-indexed investment bonds will raise funds on the global capital markets to support countries to upgrade their security architecture, rebuild damaged infrastructure in conflict-affected areas, rebuild social infrastructure, and protect zones where there are strategic investments. Here is the lesson. Without security, there cannot be investment. Without investment, there cannot be growth. And without growth, there cannot be development. The African Development Bank stands fully ready to help Nigeria in the design and implementation of security-indexed investment bonds to raise more resources to tackle its security challenges. Your Excellencies, climate change will pose significant challenges to Nigeria's economic resurgence. Climate change has already decimated a whole area of the Lake Chad Basin. Mr. President, you spoke to me directly about this. Today, the vast area of the Lake Chad Basin, which used to provide livelihoods and resources for fisheries, livestock, and food production, is now littered with parched lands, dried up waterbeds, and scorched earth. Nigeria must decisively tackle climate change. The African Development Bank will be there to help. The bank has committed to mobilize $25 billion in climate finance by 2025 in support of African countries. Here is the lesson. Nigeria must prioritize climate adaptation and mitigation actions. It should prioritize the recharging of the Lake Chad Basin. It should drive for a just energy transition. And I want to thank you, Vice President Oshibajo, for the push that you're giving on this. I followed some of your conversations on that. That we should drive for a just energy transition, which includes natural gas, to protect the economy, assure energy for industrialization, while reducing greenhouse gas emissions. As I close, Your Excellency, Mr. President, you and Nigeria sent me on an assignment. When I was elected president of the African Development Bank in 2015, as the first ever Nigerian to be president of the bank since its establishment in 1964. You personally stood by me in my most challenging moments last year. I was subsequently re-elected as president of the African Development Bank with 100% of the votes of all 81 shareholder member countries, African and non-African. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm also grateful for the tremendous support of His Excellency the Vice President, of the Minister of Finance, my dear sister, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, my dear brother Geoffrey Onyema, the Chief of Staff to the President, Professor Gambari, and indeed all members of the Cabinet, of the National Assembly, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, and of course, all Nigerians. I feel tremendously humbled by the support. I am proud of what we have accomplished at the African Development Bank since 2015. With your strong support and those of 81 shareholder member countries, African and non-African. The work of the bank has impacted on the lives of 335 million people. The African Development Bank received an increase in its general capital from $93 billion to $208 billion, the largest ever in its history. The bank has maintained its stellar AAA ratings by the major global credit agencies for 6 years in a row, thanks to your strong support as our shareholders, which also includes Nigeria. And Your Excellency, Mr. President, this year, Global Finance, the globally renowned US financial magazine, rated the African Development Bank as the best multilateral financial institution in the world in 2021. That is the kind of Africa we want. Africa showing global excellence in the middle of a turbulent world, finding solutions and driving innovation and change at scale. We must work together, hand in hand, and rise above the tide of challenges. We must never be defined by the extent of our challenges. You are a very tall man, Your Excellency, Mr. President. So you can handle water in the swimming pool. Stand in the deep end with your head and shoulders still above water. And now that I have said that, Mr. President, I must let you know that you are so tall that if you and I were going to be swimming in the pool, that would be considered unfair competition. Your Excellency, Mr. President, like a builder, strains to put one block on the other and cements them together. You need to ensure that all the blocks are now the right blocks and that they all fit together to build the kind of structure you desire and that the nation deserves. We must be remembered by our ability as individuals and collectively to rise above challenges. With sharp focus, relentless execution, fairness, equity, public accountability, and transparency, we must drive for a much better and economically stronger Nigeria, a resurgent Nigeria, the Nigeria we build, the Nigeria we love, our Nigeria. I know that Nigeria will shine. Together, let us make that happen. History must remember us for that. Thank you very much once again, my dear Mr. President, for this great honor. May God bless you, Mr. President, and may God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
That was quite eloquent, coming from our own Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, giving us the continental perspective to economic resurgence. Thank you very much, Dr. Adesina. That will bring us to the end of the first segment of this program. And we will thank our colleagues in the media who have provided coverage.
Listening to Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, the President, Africa Development Bank. He's been talking about Nigeria's economic resurgence, learning from the African experience. Rising above challenges has been the focus. And a couple of highlights here. Nigeria should fix the structure of the economy. And he has actually appealed to the president to relaunch the growth enhancement scheme and the e-wallet system that was active under the last administration, just to see a dramatic turnaround in national food production. Other highlights make youths the drivers of the economy, and all of this is geared towards a resurgent Nigeria. Earlier, we saw the Vice President give a grim figure of the various declines in the economy, and the Economic Sustainability Plan has been able to pull Nigeria back together from the economic and recession, basically. Tomorrow, the program continues with a panel discussion, accelerating delivery and ensuring impact. We also have lead facilitators and ministers in priority areas going to speak on the various subjects. You've been watching the Midterm Ministerial Performance Review Retreat. The two-day program continues now behind closed doors. Until tomorrow, I'm Gloria Umezuke. It's back to our Lagos studio for our regular programming.
You've been watching a live Channels television event.